Hey everybody, welcome to my channel. My name is Alex and today I'm going to be bringing you my mid-month wrap-up. Now if you've watched my June TBR video, you'll know that the beginning of the month was kind of up in the air as to what I was going to be reading, whereas at the end of the month I actually have 3 readathons that I'm going to be participating in. So I have actually already read enough this month to kind of justify a wrap-up. I find that if I wait until the end of the month to do a wrap-up, I wind up with about 12 books to talk about. And I usually forget a lot about what happened in the first books that I read in the month and my thoughts on them. So I thought it would be better if I split it up into 2, give you a mid-month and then a final month-long wrap-up at the end. So the day I am filming this is June 13th, and it is actually already one day into the Buzzword Readathon. I haven't actually gotten to start my reads for that readathon yet because I have been trying to catch up on some of my other books, which I'll talk about at the end of the video. But what you're going to be seeing from me today is the 6 books that I have already completed in the month of June that don't fall into any of my readathon TBRs. So without further ado, let's get started. The first book that I completed in the month of June was Aurora Rising by Jay Kristoff and Amie Kaufman. These are the 2 authors that also wrote the Illuminae Files, which is another sci-fi trilogy. This is going to be a full sci-fi series as well, and Aurora Rising is the first book. In this novel, we follow our main character, Tyler Jones, and he is the star pupil at Aurora Academy. At the beginning of the novel, Tyler is planning to amass a team to be his squad. He is determined he's going to pick the best of the best, and he's going to knock it out of the park. But he ends up getting caught up in saving this human girl who has actually been asleep for 200 years. And in the midst of him attempting to save her, he actually misses the draft where he would get to amass his squad. So he is left with kind of the bottom of the barrel candidates that nobody else would pick, kind of this ragtag team of individuals that end up going on an insane adventure. There's a lot of like space politics and intergalactic almost warfare going on in this novel. I haven't heard anybody else peg it this way, but to me it seemed like Six of Crows in space, which I am all for. I think overall I loved the Illuminae Files so much that I went into this book with expectations that were slightly too high. I did really enjoy my reading experience with this, but I think the difference in format between this and the Illuminae Files is one thing that really impacted me. In the Illuminae Files, the whole story is told through blueprints, case files, emails, IMs, things like that, not actual full dialogue. Whereas in this novel, it's just written out as a normal novel the whole way through. And I think some of that really threw me off. It took me a while to really get into the story because there's a lot of world building and character development that needs to happen. So it took me a while to latch on. But once I did, I was reading very quickly, flying through it. Absolutely love all the characters, love the action and the way that this played out, loved the political intrigue that is going into crafting this story and eventually what it will become in the rest of the trilogy. One thing that I can definitely say about Jay Kristoff and Amie Kaufman's writing is that I really appreciate that you cannot tell which author wrote what or where one author starts and the other ends because it flows together so seamlessly. There's no jarring changes of style, so it flows very nicely, which I really appreciated. So overall, I really enjoyed this first book in the new trilogy. I will definitely be continuing on as they release, and I ended up giving this one a 4 out of 5 stars. Next, I listened to the audiobook for The Cheerleaders by Kara Thomas. The Cheerleaders is a YA mystery thriller that follows our main character, Monica. 5 years before the beginning of the novel, Monica's older sister, Jen, died by suicide. Jen was a cheerleader, and there were also 4 other cheerleaders that all also passed away right around the same time, within a couple of months of each other. Since these incidents, Monica's high school has disbanded the cheer squad and everyone has kind of just attempted to move on with their lives, thinking that they know the full story of what happened to these girls. But Monica starts to uncover some secrets and starts to believe that things might not be exactly as they seem. So she goes in and tries to bring open some of the old cases to see if some of these girls were actually murdered and what the real circumstances were surrounding their deaths. Now, I don't read a ton of mystery thrillers. It's just not a genre that I usually gravitate towards, but I do like picking them up every now and again. This one, for me, was just kind of middle of the road. It was nothing terrible, but it was nothing spectacular to me. One thing I really enjoyed was the readability of it. It was very addicting. It had that quality where at the end of every chapter, you wanted to jump right into the next chapter to find out what was going to happen. It definitely kept me wanting to come back and figure out what was going on. The story follows our main character Monica, but you do also get some flashback scenes from her sister Jen before she passed away, And I thought that those flashback scenes were done really well, and they did add a lot to the story, especially the pacing of them helped to reveal things little by little as you go through, and I thought that that was done beautifully. The one complaint that I do have about them is that I feel that they introduced far too many characters, and it was really, really hard for me to keep track of who is in our present day timeline and who is in our older timeline, and just who was who in general. Some of the characters had pretty similar names, and that was confusing for me trying to keep everybody straight. Overall, again, this one was just kind of middle of the road for me. It didn't do anything that was horrible, would make me never want to recommend it to you, but it also wasn't something that was phenomenal and makes me want to recommend it to everyone. So if you like mystery thrillers and you haven't read this one yet, maybe give it a shot, kind of try it at your own risk. I ended up giving this one a 3.5 out of 5. The next book that I read was In an Absent Dream by Seanan McGuire. This is the 4th book in her Wayward Children series, which follows a group of kids who have experienced kind of a portal fantasy where, kind of like Narnia, they will go into a door that is a perfect world that's designed just for them, and somehow they wind up stuck back in the real world. Their parents think that they have kind of gone crazy, and they end up sending these kids to Eleanor West School for Wayward Children, where the parents think that the kids are going to kind of be reformed, but Eleanor West believes them, knows that their stories are true, and helps them cope with being in the real world and hopefully find their doors again someday. Some of the novellas in this series follow the school as a whole, and some of them have followed just individual characters into their own doors and their backstories. This story in particular follows one of our main characters, Lundy, who goes into a world full of logic and rules. I have loved the Wayward Children series as a whole so far. Seanan McGuire does a beautiful job of just making you genuinely care about her characters. The main characters or the side characters, they are all so well developed in such a small amount of pages. It's honestly outstanding, just phenomenal the way that she can craft such wide worlds in often less than 200 pages. Even though there was a lot of world building to be done in this novella, I did not feel like it was info dumpy at all. I was not confused. I felt like it flowed very well. It was easy for me to understand as it wove along throughout the story, and it really just added a really unique and special element to this world. There's not too much to say about this one without getting spoilery since it is so short, but just know if you have enjoyed this series, I would definitely go ahead and continue to get to this 4th one if you haven't already, and I cannot wait for the series to continue. I ended up giving this one a 5 out of 5 stars. Next, I read The Astonishing Color of After by Emily X.R. Pan. I mainly listened to this one on audiobook, but I did read a little bit of the physical book as well as I was going through. I will say it was much easier for me to get through the story listening to the audiobook, and I really appreciated the narrator. I think that she did a very good job. And there are a couple of instances in here where other languages are spoken, such as Mandarin and Taiwanese, and the narrator does a very good job in her pronunciation of those languages. So if you have access to the audiobook, I would definitely recommend going that way for this novel. The Astonishing Color of After follows our main character, Lee, who at the beginning of the story, Lee's mother has passed away by suicide. And while this was happening, Lee was actually coming home from having her first kiss with her best friend named Axel. After Lee's mother passes away, she returns to Lee in the form of a bird and tells Lee that she needs to go to Taiwan and meet her maternal grandparents whom she has never met. So you follow Lee as she goes to Taiwan to meet her grandparents, and you get flashbacks between the present and the past, learning about her mother and father's relationship and her mother's relationship with her parents, really just the essence of her mother's entire life, combined with Lee coming into this new world, meeting these grandparents that she's never met, and trying to figure out why her mother did what she did. This is a debut novel from last year that a bunch of people were hyping up, so I was really excited going forward, and I can definitely see why it's gotten as much hype as it has. The writing style in this is very flowery and lyrical, so if you don't like that, you may not like this element of the story, but I thought that it added a beautiful element to the story, especially with Lee's mother coming back as a bird, puts a magical element onto the story, and the writing style very much matched those magical elements. I really appreciated how in this book, Emily X.R. Pan does not shy away from describing depression. So obviously there are trigger warnings for grief, depression, and suicide in this novel. She does go very much in depth showing Lee's mother's day-to-day life dealing with depression. Some days she's better and some days she's worse, and you get to see all of that. Obviously, this is not going to reflect the situation of everybody that suffers from depression, but I feel like this was a really thorough and well thought out and carefully handled way of examining what depression can potentially look like. The story did lose me a little bit at times. This one is pretty chunky for a contemporary or magical realism type novel at almost 500 pages long, so I feel like it may have benefited from being just a little tiny bit shorter, but I do still appreciate the story as a whole. I think Emily X. Arpan is an incredibly talented writer, and I will definitely be reading more that she publishes in the future. Very excited to see what else she can do. So I ended up giving this one a 4 out of 5 stars. Next, I listened to the audiobook for The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. This was a reread for me, but I have not actually read it in probably about 6 or 7 years, and this is my all-time favorite classic. I would argue that this is the great American novel. I don't feel like I really need to explain what this novel is about because it has been out for almost 100 years now, and it has been made into a couple different movie adaptations, but if you're not aware, the story follows a young man named Nick Carraway, who is our narrator, and he meets this man in New York named Jay Gatsby, who is very rich and throws these very big, extravagant parties trying to win back the love of Daisy Buchanan. It's a lot more complicated than that, but that's kind of the gist of it. This is a great example of 1920s America and the American dream and just really everything that you could ever want from a novel. I have adored this novel ever since the first time I read it. This was my 3rd time reading it, and I've been meaning to reread it for a very, very, very long time, and I'm so glad that I finally did. I really enjoyed the audiobook version that I listened to. I don't remember who narrated it, but I'll put it down here so you guys can see. But the novel itself is only about 180 pages long, so the audiobook did not take me that long to get through it all, and I felt like it was done really well by this narrator. Overall, doing this reread, it's definitely not a flawless novel. I can definitely understand why some people don't enjoy it and some of the qualms that they have with it, but it will always hold a special place in my heart. I still think it's wonderful. I still think that it's the great American novel. Obviously, I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars again. And lastly, I have finished Beartown by Fredrik Backman. I again listened to the audiobook for this novel as well. Beartown is the story of a hockey town where a young woman accuses one of the star hockey players of rape. That is just the story's plot in a nutshell, but there is much, much more going on in the town. Hockey is number one for everybody in the town. It ends up getting very political and a lot of drama ensues, as you can obviously tell. Of course, huge trigger warnings for rape and sexual assault. There are a couple of pretty graphic descriptions of things that go on, so please know that going in if that's something that's going to affect you. I have read almost every other Fredrik Backman book to date, and this one is definitely different than other ones that he's written, but I loved it just the same. I will say at first it took me a little bit to get into this one because there are a lot of characters, so it takes you a while to kind of orient yourself and figure out who's who, and even towards the end of the novel I found that I kind of lost sight of who was who to each other. But the main characters in the story, I never got confused. I always knew what was going on, so I didn't feel like I lost anything in the story by not knowing exactly who the other side characters were. But again, just know that going in, if you think you might do better physically reading it because of all the characters, you might want to take that into consideration. Every single character in this story is so rich and complex, and they're done so beautifully. You get little snippets from everybody. It's a very omnipotent narrator who gets into everybody's head, so you know exactly what everybody's thinking and what's going on and how everybody weaves together. And Fredrik Backman's dialogue is just perfect for letting you see everybody's emotions. He will do little callbacks to other points in the novel that really just make everything weave together so beautifully. It's something that he is so talented at and that I have loved in every single one of his novels so far. This novel has definitely brought out some big emotions in me. I have not personally been affected by the topics that are being handled in this novel, but some of what goes on in the dialogue and how the town is handling it just like boils my blood when you hear the things that people are saying about this girl who has gone through one of the most horrific experiences that an individual can have, and just the trash that these people are saying about her. It really just boils your blood. So be ready to be emotional and mad if you read this book because it's ridiculous, but that's exactly what the book is trying to do in my opinion, and it does it beautifully. So just know you will probably get mad while reading this book, but that's what it's supposed to do. That's what it's there for. This is the first book in a duology. The second book is called Us Against You, and I will definitely be continuing on with that. I'm really interested to see what is going to happen as the story progresses. I do feel like Beartown ended at a place that kind of wraps the story arc up. So if you choose not to continue on to Us Against You, I obviously don't know for sure, but I don't feel like you're gonna miss out on anything in the story since Beartown does come to a close on its own, but I will definitely be continuing on because I love Frederick Buckman. I think I only have 2 more books of his to read to have completed his entire backlist, so I'm very excited about that. But as you can probably guess, I gave this book a 5 out of 5 stars. Hey guys, Editing Alex here. I just realized that I told you I would talk about the books that I'm currently reading at the end of the video, and then I didn't do it. So I thought I would just film a little bitty clip and pop it in here. The books that I am currently reading that don't fit into any of the readathons, I am reading the ebook for The Knife of Never Letting Go by Patrick Ness. I think about 40% of the way through, very slowly getting through that one, so hopefully I'll be able to finish it soon. And then I am physically reading The Wicked King by Holly Black. I am really enjoying it so far. I'm just in the middle of a big reading slump, so it has not been moving as quickly as I would like it, but hopefully I'll be reading it soon because I do have a physical book that I'm hoping to read for the Buzzwordathon. I'm going to be reading P.S. I Like You by Casey West as a physical read, so hopefully I can get The Wicked King done very soon. And it might even be done by the time that you see this video. Wouldn't that be great? But there's that. That's what I'm currently reading. So that is it for my mid-month wrap-up. Those are the 6 books that I have already completed in June. So at the end of the month, be looking out for another wrap-up where I will tell you all about the books that I read for the 3 readathons that I'm going to be participating in the rest of the month. If you have read any of the books that I talked about today or want to share any of your thoughts, please leave them in the comments down below. I would love to chat with you guys and see what you've already been reading in June. So until next time, bye!